you can and you're running with kings. But how far could you go if you run with the wind? And the chances you take are what give you wings, and you can fly.
All right, and we're back again for another interview with Kent Roberts, co-founder of the Civility Center. Welcome to Consider Civility, and we are talking about civility in the community. And so in a previous interview, Kent talked to us in brief really about civil dialogue, and there was mention of an activity that you have used frequently in your training, Kent, that you call the World Cafe. And one of the commitments we've made to our listeners is to be able to provide them with some practical tools and strategies that they can take back in their workplaces or communities. And so I would be really grateful if you could explain a little bit about the World Cafe, how it works. And then for our audience, if you would like to book a consult with Kent one-on-one for an hour so that you could delve into it a little bit deeper, and if you're planning a World Cafe, there is a small consulting fee that applies, but it might benefit you greatly to have Kent help you devise the questions and some of the approach if you decide to use this tool for your group. So Kent, can you tell us about this World Cafe?
Yes. I first ran across World Cafe. I've mentioned Peter Senge in the past, and some people are familiar with Peter Senge, the fifth discipline, the whole idea of learning. His first world conference was in Helsinki, Finland. And we had people from around 40 different countries. There was about 350 of us there. And we'd start every day with a World Cafe. Now, the World Cafe is a simple design. There's a book called The World Cafe with the subtitle, Shaping Our Futures Through Conversations That Matter. And it was written by Juanita Brown and David Isaacs. And I think that if someone wants to get the book, but you can alter it. I've altered it just to suit many different situations. I've done the World Cafe with as many as 500 people and as few people as 15 or 20. So it really works. And the main thing I want to say about the World Cafe is that it creates a level playing field. And it creates the whole idea. A lot of times you're sitting in a circle, sitting with a small number of people. There's food, whether it be coffee or tea or some other beverage, and you start out with a conversation, and someone instructs the room to talk about this topic, and someone be an informal recorder. Don't have to take a tremendous amount of notes, but just kind of record some ideas and thoughts and ask a very general question, something very simple. And a lot of times, to me, what worked for me is a strength-based question. What's the best thing about whatever? What's the strength of this organization, or the strength of your community, or what is it that you do really well? Something along those lines. And then after a period of 15 minutes or so, I asked the person who did the informal recording to stay at the table, and everyone else moved to another table, but not together. Now, if you were to do this for an hour, in other words, just make like 3 or 4 moves within an hour, and each time you'd ask a clarifying question a little bit farther and deeper, you'd be surprised that in a room of, say, 400 or 500 people, general themes would start to emerge. And people would feel very comfortable in talking at a table with just 3, 4, 5 people sitting there. And so you get a lot of ideas. Everyone gets a chance to talk. No one dominates the conversation. And then if you want to do a report out, you can. And that one person ends up staying is the recorder. That person never leaves that particular table. And it just evolves and grows, and the outcomes I found are quite profound.
Wow, it sounds so easy the way you describe it, but I can see how there must be sort of this kind of creative, like this, like with 500 people in the room like that, the kind of mood, and it must really be incredible to be able to capture all of that. And how do you capture it? Do you record these sessions, or do you have a scribe at the table? Does everything get collected or photographed, or how do you save all of that good data and insight that you're collecting?
Well, if you have 500, you're not going to do as good a job as you would if there was a room of, say, 80 or less. But you just ask the scribe. Often, what we put is butcher block paper on the table, and we encourage people to doodle and draw and list and put there. And one person who stays at the table captures different ideas. And when you come to that, when you change tables, you introduce yourself, and the person says, well, this is what we discussed at this table. This is how we answered that first question at this table. What did you have at your tables? And then all these other people report out of what happened at their table. Now, remember, if you've got 5 people there, you've got 5 tables reporting to one person at one time. And then you build upon that question from the first time. You give them an opportunity to kind of discuss what was discussed at the tables. Then you ask a little deeper question, and then they build on it from there. And then you ask them to rotate again. And now, by the time you get to the third table, you could have 15 or 20 tables, actually ideas from 15 or 20 tables represented at that one table. And usually some themes or keys start to grow. And at some time you can do a report out and ask a general report out. And you'd be surprised, say, what's the, you could ask too, by about the 5th report out, what are the 5 most important key things that we've learned so far this morning? And you'd be surprised how many of those five themes would be carried out at other tables, that you start to hear it come back at you in many different ways. So I
Sure.
think that it's a nice icebreaker. It's a way to get people talking, a way to get people heard in a very non-threatening way. It's a level playing field. It kind of goes back to the whole idea that everything of value was probably learned and talked about in a circle. You can actually have a talking stick so that when one person is talking, they have something in their hand where they have the floor. You can do a whole bunch of things that add to it that fit your goal of the day, and this is a beginning exercise. So I think that it can lead into, especially if you've got a real important question later on in the day or in the meeting that really has to be addressed. This can create context for what was going on. I could give you plenty of examples of how that would work, but for the sake of time here, I won't. But I think that people can see that you create context, and you can get to information that they now have been a part of creating, and context they're part of creating, to when the real question comes before the group, they have the opportunity to really share some important insights.
Excellent. Thank you. That sounds like such a great tool. And once again, for our listeners, if you're interested in learning more or trying it out, will you just tell us one more time the name of the book that you mentioned?
Yeah, it's entitled The World Cafe, and the subtitle is Shaping Our Futures Through Conversations That Matter, and it's by Juanita Brown with David Isaacs. And a- again, I don't think that anybody will find the book that profound, except for the mere fact that it's so simple and that it works so well and that it is easy to adapt and use, depending on what your situation, from simple questions to for icebreakers to getting to some really complex problem solving.
Perfect. Thanks very much, and thank you all for joining us. We'll see you next time as our series continues on civility in the community with Kent Roberts, co-founder of the Civility Center, and this is Consider Civility. Thank you.
The reason why each of us comes to this earth, and your actions will always speak louder than words, and you'll never know what you're capable of until you try.